2013 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It is my privilege to call this meeting to order. There are copies of our agenda on either side of the room. If you haven't already done so, I would invite you to pick one up and please follow along with our proceedings tonight. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to items that are on our agenda as well as a section under segment 4, which is reserved for public comments of a general nature with respect to items that are not appearing on our agenda tonight. It is our custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. So at this point, I would ask that everyone please rise and join us in reciting the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. I'd like to now ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, to please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Rankin? Here. Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 3 on our agenda, minutes of council meetings. We have one set of council meeting minutes to approve from our August 6, 2013 regular council meeting. Are there changes, corrections, comments, or contortions from any members of the village council? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. Those minutes are approved as presented. And here we are at item 4, public comments. If there are any general comments on matters not appearing on tonight's agenda, we would welcome hearing from you at this time. So if there are any public comments, questions, comments of a general nature with respect to items not appearing on our agenda tonight, this is the period in the meeting in which we entertain them. The protocol is to please come down to the podium, give us your name and address, and we would love to hear from you. Are there any questions or comments of a general nature? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Frank Kozar. I'm a deacon at the St. Joseph's Church here in Downers Grove, and I'm representing the various churches that would like to present 6 points regarding the utility and stormwater issue. Would you like me to just read those points as we go, or some of them are lengthy, but if you just bear with me.
Whatever you prefer, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Okay. We understand that the attempt here is to create a utility for stormwater. However, you are a government entity providing the same services you were providing when it was funded by taxes. To us, it is still a tax, but by leveling the fee in this manner, you are crossing the inherent value of separation of church and state. Second, by creating the utility, you have become the owner of the utility, yet we do not have the safeguard to protect us from the excess price increases. We do not have an independent utility commission to help regulate future price increase or free market forces to increase efficiencies or to create competitive pricing. Remember the Chicago water rate increase. 80 to 90% increases across the board with no recourse to hold that price hike accountable. Also, if there is a 10% increase for 15 years or 15% increase for 10 years, whatever it is, it sounds like the utility fee could potentially equal the total operating budget of Downers Grove currently. This size of government has become disconcerting to some individuals. Our third concern is the significant financial burden that this fee places on our faith communities. This burden will inhibit our ability to provide services. As you know, these services include food pantries, housing assistance, and counseling for some of our poorest residents. The churches have very limited abilities to increase their revenue. As you understand, plant and equipment costs are fixed. Thus, a cut in services is where this money will come from. This places a greater and unfair burden on the poorest people of our community. One of the goals of creating the utility was to share the burden equally among all residences, businesses, and government entities. We admire the fact that you included the Downers Grove government into the stormwater fee, yet you provided obtainable credits in the Park District that has in essence exempted them. We understand that part of that exemption is in place for their role in water retention. Yet their service, their duty, is to provide gathering places for our community. Fishing, boating, and green space are key tools in this equation. If an added benefit is water retention, then that is fantastic. But to say that the service of providing water retention ponds to the community is a greater value, worthy of an exemption, than what the churches provide the community, that is food, pantries, housing assistance, counseling, and so forth, raises the question of fairness. The case can be made that the churches are now replacing the social services cut by the villages during these hard economic times. If the burden of the stormwater utility fee is to be shared equally, then what you have done is added an extra burden on those residents who choose to worship and choose to financially support their churches. Statistically, half of all Downers Grove residents choose to worship. Of that half, only a third chooses to contribute financially. Since churches will need to pass the fee on their financial contributors, the church fee will now be serviced by only 20 to 25% of the people of Downers Grove. These residences are already paying for their own residential fee. If you were to exempt all churches, the burden would be equally passed on to all taxed entities, not the 20 to 30% of our community that chooses to contribute to churches. If the Park District were to lose its exemption, then 100% of the property owners of Downers Grove have now become responsible for the financial commitment, not 20 to 25% of the residents. Finally, from the procedural level, this committee of Downers Grove churches feels the $300 application fee for credits is exorbitant. Also, we would expect better definitions of what a credit is and should be, perhaps a broader area of credits and possibly waiving the fee until there is a better understanding of what is an allowable credit is needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Deacon. I appreciate you sharing those thoughts with us, as well as your predecessors who have come and shared similar thoughts. Just a few observations, and obviously appreciate you coming down here and sharing all this with us. First, with respect to the issue of separation of church and state, I won't get into the issue, but stormwater utility might be new in DuPage County, but it's not new in Illinois, and it's certainly not new in the United States. The issue has been resolved in the courts, where if a utility is set up appropriately, which I believe that we have, because we have the advantage of the experience of others, it doesn't rise to that level of that kind of a conflict. Clearly, it's not something we'd be interested in, but that issue had previously been litigated and decided, which is why the path that we followed in doing this one was with that in mind.
But we would hope that would be the way it would
Well,
be.
absolutely. We certainly want to do something that would be violative of constitutional rights, but we have the benefit of knowing that that issue has already been addressed and determined by the courts. And guidance has been provided that we certainly took into account in formulating our own utility. Second, with respect to the price increases and accountability, there's absolutely accountability in terms of any increases in the stormwater utility fee, and it starts right here. The 7 people who are on this council, before any increases are actually implemented, regardless of what might be projected as possible increases given our stormwater needs, those issues will be addressed every year. In fact, it's going to be addressed this year when we get into our budget season about what are the stormwater needs in terms of capital, infrastructure, and maintenance, and then what dollars need to be generated out of the stormwater utility fee in order to address those needs. It will be very open. There will be lots of opportunities for public comment. I guarantee you that there will be more opportunities for discussion and public comment than what preceded the water rate increase that we got from the city of Chicago, which we had no choice but to pass along because that was dictated to us by our neighbors to the east. The concept of utility here is not like electric utility. It speaks more of sort of an enterprise fund where, like with our water system, in order to maintain the infrastructure that transmits water from the DuPage County Water Commission to our water towers and then to our residents for use, there's certain costs that go along with that. There's the cost of the water, then there's the cost of the infrastructure that will allow it to be transmitted. And we can project out what those costs are, and then we back that into what the fee is that we charge people for water. And we also charge the faith-based community for water as well. And that's obviously something that we've always done. And so that's where those prices come from. So like with the stormwater utility, it's kind of the reverse. We have all this water that we have to manage. And by the way, we don't have a choice about managing it. We're required to manage our stormwater. up to certain standards. So it's not just a good idea for our residents, especially those that will remember what happened in late April of this year, but it's something that we're obligated to do, and yet we're not given funding to do it, so we have to do it and come up with our own funding sources. So this is a funding source to meet those obligations that we do our best to tie to what our actual needs are. And so that is a process that we will repeat every year, and it will be done in settings just like this, where everybody can look at the numbers and challenge our assumptions and see how it is that we're coming up with the numbers. And if we don't need an increase, we're certainly not going to implement one. It's all designed to meet our actual maintenance and capital needs for our stormwater infrastructure. With respect to it being a burden, an additional burden on the faith-based organizations such as churches, completely understand and appreciate that. And yes, the nature of the utility is that it spreads out the cost of the program, the cost of maintaining the infrastructure and capital projects for stormwater amongst more payers, including payers who didn't previously pay. And by definition, it's a burden on those folks because they didn't pay before and now they are. I fully appreciate that. But that's one of the advantages of the program, is it spreads it out more equitably across more people who generate stormwater. Any property that there is generates some amount of stormwater. And so they're contributing to the system and contributing to the cost of having to manage it. If we had simply increased property taxes, arguably we would continue to increase a differential between the properties that were only generating around 47 to 50% of the stormwater runoff, and yet we're carrying almost 75 or more % of the cost of the program. And that chasm would have continued to widen, creating at least in my opinion, an inequity that we couldn't continue to foster. With respect to the burden being equal in terms of credits, yes, the program does have a number of different types of credits, including partnership credits, which I believe that was the one you were referring to with the Park District. And without getting into all the details, some of our projects with the Park District have entailed far more than just using open fields, and there have been substantial construction projects that have taken place on their property that really help us manage our stormwater far more effectively to the benefit of the community. And we recognize those partnerships and those advantages that end up leading to the credits or the exemptions that those partners have. With respect to the impact on social services, I understand that point, and any additional cost, whatever it is, whether it's the cost of gasoline, the stormwater utility, anything is going to necessarily be another point of friction with respect to any organizations, whether it's a faith-based organization or any other not-for-profit's ability to succeed in its mission. And we do understand that, and I think it's one of the reasons why we've tried to do the best we can to actively promote and engage with respect to how credits can be applied for and achieved, to try to maybe reduce that burden a little bit, understanding what the nature of the program is. And then last, you raise a good point about the fee for credits and what types of credits there might be. We will be looking at that issue in the very near future amongst some other aspects of the stormwater utility. It was implemented in January and February of this year. We've learned some things based on our real-world experience post-implementation, and there may be some adjustments coming in the future, including what the application fee is, whether if you apply for the credit and you get the credit, you get your fee back. There may be different things that we'll talk about that might ease that burden upon not-for-profit organizations. So we're certainly listening and empathetic in that regard, and really appreciate you coming down and continuing this dialogue, because it is an ongoing and evolving process.
And we thank you for your time and hope for the best for all of us.
Likewise. Thank you, Deacon. Good to see you. Any other questions or comments of a general nature?
Good evening, Mayor and Council and staff. From the actions of the Village Council from the last year through the present, based on the number of meetings, based on the cuts made to programs, based on special meetings, based on time and effort staff has spent on research, which came with negative results, I might say, based on the political gamemanship, especially preceding the elections, based on the priorities set in the long-range financial planning by the council, it is apparent that the Village Council is more concerned with these, and for those of you behind me, it's a picture of a chicken, than you are concerned with our senior residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for comments. Good to see you, Mr. Waldeck. I don't know if you gave us your name and address at the very beginning, but I think we know who you are and where to find you.
Well, the public might want to know to get after me.
I thought
William Waldeck, 1409 Willard Place in Downers Grove. I never had to do that when I was up there, so I apologize.
No worries.
One of these years I'll get it right.
It's habit. Thank you for sharing your views. Other questions or comments from any members of the audience? Questions of a general nature? All right, hearing none, that brings us to item 5, council member reports. Are there items that any of the council members would like to report out? We'll start with Commissioner Barnett tonight. Thank you. Commissioner Olson?
Did just want to report some good news that I saw today. Nothing official, but I was jogging in the neighborhood. Sean should join me next time, but I was jogging and I saw there are 4 lanes of traffic open on Belmont Road. I was thrilled. They finally opened the bridge. So, though I couldn't utilize it because I was jogging, I was very excited to see that and excited to see DuPage County coming to the conclusion of that project.
Thank you. Commissioner Newstead, would you like me to contact Chief Porter about ticketing Mr. Olson for running in Belmont?
That's true. I think they put in some new sidewalks out there.
There is new sidewalk present.
Now, let that be a lesson to all of you. Don't run on the sidewalk, not the street. I'm sorry, were you finished, Commissioner?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a little reminder that the Downers Grove Downtown Photo Tour and History Quiz is taking place this month through August 31st. You can enjoy a gentle walk through the downtown area to view historic images that capture a Downers Grove of yesteryear. Participating merchants are distributing cards that include mystery photos of Downers Grove and a short history quiz about our village. You can visit the Downers Grove Historical Society's website for more information and answers to the mystery photo and history questions at www.downersgrovehistory.org.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin?
I would like to remind everyone that the Grove Foundation's annual golf outing is coming up on Saturday, September 7th. It's the 21st annual. It will be held at the Park Golf Course. There's still time to register, and you can register at www.grovefoundation.org. You can get more information, download a form, and send in your registration. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, thank you. As we're talking about roads and construction, unfortunately, Main Street south of 63rd, just north of 71st Street is basically down to 1 lane at times, 2 lanes at a time. They're resurfacing that, and from what I understand, it's going to be continuing this week with the actual repavement being done next week sometime. So, unfortunately, we don't have 4 lanes over there, as Commissioner Olson had stated he does over at Belmont. So with that, there is a, hard to believe already, the 5th annual Labor of Love hosted by the Downers Grove Lions Club. This is a 5K walk and a 1K kids event that's going to take place Monday, September 2nd, Labor Day, starting at 8 o'clock over at McCollum Park. For those that are interested in those, all the repeat runners, please visit the website at www.5klaboroflove.org. And I know that I'm sure Commissioner Olson and the mayor will be running. I unfortunately will not be. I'll be participating, watching, and cheering. So if you're not, if you don't have any solid plans for Labor Day, please, this is a great event. And this is money that is put back into our communities, and it benefits all that the Lions Club stands for. So appreciate your support. Thank you.
Just 2 quick things about that I like about this race is, number 1, it is a CARA certified event for those that care about that. And then second of all, and more importantly, the finish line is only steps away from the paramedics. There's a fire station right at the end of the street there. So I always feel very good in that race because if something happens, I can literally crawl in for medical assistance. Commissioner Newstead.
Thank you, Mayor. The Village of Downers Grove is happy to offer a bunch of ways to stay connected with its residents and businesses. If you check out our website at downers.us, on the right-hand side, there's a tab that says Stay Connected, and you can sign up for village alerts and important information via email, phone, and a bunch of different ways. So it's pretty easy to register. Just like to remind everybody now and again that that is an available
service that we provide. It's a great way to stay connected and informed in case of an emergency in the village. Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner. For my own part, two things very quickly. Number one, just want to congratulate, again, Downers Grove Lions Club on today's very successful 82nd Annual New Teachers Luncheon, which was held over at Downers Delight today. It was very well attended, and it has become a tremendous tradition, as the 81 events of its kind beforehand indicate, welcoming all the new teachers to District 58, District 99, and other schools in our community, understanding and appreciating how important they are to the quality of life in our community, and something that allows us to achieve recognition such as the 8th friendliest community in the United States, according to Forbes magazine. It's always nice to see the different organizations that attend in coordination with the Downers Grove Lions Club, a terrific not-for-profit organization here in town. Commissioner Neustadt, Commissioner Olson, Commissioner Durkin, and myself were able to attend today, as did Village Manager Fieldman, Chief Jackson, and Chief Porter, as well as Marcia Giesler, representatives of our Chamber of Commerce, our library, of course our leadership in District 58 and District 99. Truly a wonderful event, and I want to thank Tony Tomia and the rest of the Downers Grove Lions Club for continuing this tradition in our community, because I think it really makes an impact upon the new teachers, who of course play such a critical role in, as I said, maintaining and enhancing the quality of life in our community. Second item I just want to mention is to remind everyone that we will have another Coffee with the Council on August 17th at 9 a.m. And the location this month will be at Dorhofer Park, located at 41st and Saratoga Avenue. So we'll be there from, some of us will be there from 9 until 10 this Saturday morning. If there are any residents who would like to come by, maybe as they jog by or cycle by on the day, and would like to stop in and talk to the council, there will be members of the council in attendance. I'm planning on attending myself, and we look forward to seeing you then. We're going to have to get that sign about silencing your phone before you come to meetings.
So sorry.
It's all right. I could think of at least 25 other ringtones that would be more annoying than that one.
I won't go there. Look at that, Bill.
Item 6, we have no public hearings tonight, so we'll go right to item 7, our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to the consent agenda? Or any items on the consent agenda? Any questions or comments from members of the Village Council with respect to the consent agenda? May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, consent agenda passes unanimously. That brings us to our active agenda. We have a number of items on our active agenda tonight. We'll begin with item 8A. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance proposing the establishment of a special service area number 6?
Mayor Tully, I move to adopt an ordinance proposing the establishment of a special service area number 6 in the village of Downers Grove, Illinois, and providing for a public hearing and other procedures in connection therewith as presented.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? Questions or comments from members of the council? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The matter passes unanimously. It brings us to item 8B as in boy. Do I have a motion to accept an update to the bicycle and pedestrian plan?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to this item? Questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Commissioner Olson?
Before we vote, I just wanted to have some brief remarks. This is not a perfect plan in my opinion, but it's a strong vision that we've expressed for our community, including concrete steps to reach the vision for this specific area of concern that's important to many of our residents. I'd like to recognize countless hours dedicated to this plan by village staff, interested residents, and others. Their efforts have not gone unnoticed or unappreciated, and I'd like to thank them. Would like to note a couple things before voting on this plan from my perspective. First off, I do, as mentioned last week, I have some concerns and remain opposed at this time to removing lanes of traffic on 55th Street, Main Street, and Fairview Avenue to create the road diet or as presented in the plan. I think I strongly believe in an all-of-the-above transportation strategy where this village is accommodating to all forms of transportation, whether that be via automobile, bicycle, or one's own 2 feet. And I would not want to inconvenience one group of transportation users in order for what I perceive as somewhat of a limited benefit on those streets. However, I think this is an excellent plan on the whole, and look forward to working together with all those residents who may be interested in ensuring that these recommendations and do find their way into concrete proposals that we will see in front of this council in the years to come. I'd also like to thank staff for making the changes that we discussed last week, removing some of the specific dates, but still leaving in the fact that there are some things that can be done on more of a short, medium, and long-term vision. So I do plan to support this plan. I do plan to vote to accept the plan, but I would like to note that I certainly don't, while am voting to accept the plan, I'm not voting to accept the plan because I agree with every word, but I think this is a good policy document, it's a good planning document for our village, and I look forward to using it and working with residents to see it implemented in the future. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council on this item? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin? Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Matter passes unanimously. It brings us to item 8C. Do I have a motion to adopt a resolution approving the final plat of subdivision with exceptions for 4101 Lindley Street and 913 40th Street?
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments on this item from anyone in the audience? Hearing none, any questions or comments from members of the village council on this item? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin? Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The matter also passes unanimously. It brings us to item 8D as in David. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance rezoning property located at 2525 Indianapolis Avenue from R1 single-family residence to R4 single-family residence?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to this item? Seeing none, any questions or comments from members of the village council? Seeing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin? Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The matter also passes unanimously. Brings us to item 8E as in Edward. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance designating a crosswalk at Brook Drive?
Mayor Tully, I move that we adopt an ordinance designating a crosswalk at Brook Drive as presented.
Second.
Are there any questions from any members of the audience with respect to this item? Seeing there are none, any questions from members of the village council? Seeing that there are none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Matter passes unanimously. It brings us to item 8F as in Frank. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance that would establish a 15-minute parking zone on Burlington Avenue?
Mayor, I move to adopt an ordinance establishing a 15-minute parking zone on Burlington Avenue as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to this item? Seeing that there are none, any questions or comments from members of the village council on this item? Seeing that there are none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter also passes unanimously, and that brings us to item 8G as in Gus. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance to restrict turns on Warrenville Road?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience on this item? Any questions or comments from any members of the village council? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter also passes unanimously and brings us to the close of our active agenda and to item 9 on our agenda, which is our first reading or the workshop portion of our meeting, where we entertain matters for presentation and discussion and consideration for possible action at a later point in time. It is customary to turn over this portion of the meeting for presentation to Village Manager David Fieldman.
Thank you. Just two items on tonight's first reading agenda. The first is consideration of an ordinance that would amend our stormwater and floodplain ordinance and the provisions therein, generally described as housekeeping amendments. And here to present this item is our Public Works Director, Nan Newland.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is a minor revision to the county-wide stormwater and floodplain ordinance. You may remember that in 2012, DuPage County adopted a major update and a rewrite of the ordinance, and the village subsequently approved that ordinance on May 8th, 2012. We are a full waiver community and enforce this ordinance throughout our community to address local stormwater management, drainage, and water quality issues. Our stormwater administrator, Karen Dalton Lang, is chair of the Municipal Engineers Group, and that group has been working over the past year since the ordinance's rewrite with the county on some technical issues and just language in the ordinance to make it a better ordinance. And they worked with the county to put this language together. It is basically text amendments that provide more flexibility to communities when working with residents and on projects to make it a better project. In addition to the county-wide text amendments, staff is recommending clarifying language to two sections of the ordinance that specify submittal requirements to better provide information to developers and their engineers. These are questions that come up that we answer. That's not a change to our practice. It just makes it more clear to them. It also includes language that addresses the building protection requirements for properties in the LPDA. Again, it's a clarification. It's not a change to the way that we currently administer the ordinance to make it more user-friendly and more understandable to people that are in the village. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from any members of the audience at this point with respect to the item presented? Any questions from members of the Village Council? Commissioner Neustadt?
Thank you, Mayor. Nan, can you tell us a little bit more about Karen Dalton's role as the chairperson on that committee? I mean, we have somebody at the table making these text amendments, keeping all of our recent history in our floods in mind. I mean, that's who else is on that committee? Is it other municipalities or folks from the county?
Well, any municipality that chooses to has a representative on the group. It's typically their stormwater engineer or engineer on their staff who minister the ordinance. And it's a way to keep the ordinance in touch with all the communities that administer it with the county. So the county isn't just writing the ordinance language on their own. We each contribute to it and provide feedback and suggestions, and they all work together on those type of issues.
Sounds like an excellent way to come up with good text amendments. That's all I have tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, this was one of the proposed changes to the county ordinance that was actually called for by municipalities to get the engineers, the people who are actually out in the ditches, so to speak, to weigh in on these issues at the county level, because the experience in the field is highly valuable, obviously. So this was one of the positive additions to the new ordinance. Other questions or comments from members of the council? Hearing none, thank you for the presentation.
The final item on tonight's first reading agenda is consideration of an ordinance that would repeal the Ogden Avenue Site Improvement Strategy, commonly known as the OASIS program. But it's really more about an evolution of how we're committing to further redeveloping and investing in Ogden Avenue. And here to present more information on the switch in our approach from an OASIS program to redevelopment agreements is the president of the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation, Michael Casa.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm not Tom Daybreiner. Michael Casa, President of Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation, 2001 Butterfield Road, Suite 120 in Downers Grove. I want to just talk briefly about why Ogden Avenue is important as a priority for the EDC. At our annual luncheon in late June, I spoke to this a little bit in my remarks when we talked about the new Starbucks project, which is coming to the corner of Prince and Ogden. This really was an outgrowth of an August 2012 Economic Development Corporation Executive Committee meeting, which was held here at Village Hall and was devoted to the subject of Ogden Avenue. And it was during that discussion that the EDC Executive Committee unanimously recommended that the village use those TIF funds primarily for redevelopment opportunities. And at a village council meeting in the early part of 2013, when you were taking up the issue of the potential changes to the OASIS program, again, that message came through loud and clear that redevelopment opportunities on Ogden Avenue were how those funds should be used and where our efforts should be. One of the things that we've been doing in the past year is contacting property owners on Ogden Avenue whose properties have some redevelopment potential, and then trying to identify tenants that may be a fit for those particular redevelopment opportunities. This is a bit of a change in the past where we were trying to find sites for tenants that were looking on Ogden and in some cases having difficulty. So we've been working with the property owners, and in some cases they've actually come and met with the EDC and the village staff to talk about redevelopment opportunities for their properties. In addition, we've been looking for opportunities for some unified development. So when we're talking to a property owner, we take a look at also what are the properties on either side of their piece, what does the comprehensive plan call for, and are there an opportunity to sort of join those properties together to make for a larger site, which helps alleviate one of the issues we have, which is that a lot of the sites are small. And finally, paying attention to those catalyst sites that you also identified in your comprehensive plan, those that are at intersections, specifically signalized intersections. And that is one of the things that led Starbucks to the site at Prince and Ogden. So I'm here to let you know that that the changes to the OASIS program or the elimination of it notwithstanding, Ogden Avenue remains a very important priority for the EDC. A great number of the inquiries that come into our office are directed at Ogden Avenue, and we certainly want to have as many of those opportunities come to fruition. We have been heavily promoting that there are TIF funds available for redevelopment on Ogden Avenue, and I remain convinced that the best way to make Ogden Avenue more attractive as well as more prosperous is through the use of redevelopment.
Just one final note. Obviously, the OASIS program has been very successful, leveraging over $1.3 million in private investment with matching grants of about $500,000. The items and the proposals that would have come through OASIS, should we continue to do that, are still eligible to be funded just through a different vehicle called a redevelopment agreement. So it's not only the things Michael talked about catalyst redevelopments, but the same things are eligible under the general TIF program that would be funded in the OASIS. It's just that we would use a different vehicle, a non-programmatic vehicle, more on a case-by-case basis, but we could still do the same type of project with the same funding arrangement. And with that, all of us, including Tom, are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience with respect to the presentation on this item thus far? Hearing no questions. Questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Commissioner Rankin?
I'm sorry I didn't ask this ahead of time. So if an existing business wants to change the appearance of their business, is not a new business coming in, they'd be eligible for redevelopment?
Yes, improvements to private buildings remain eligible under the general TIF ordinances as a redevelopment cost. So whether it's OASIS or a redevelopment agreement, that would still be an eligible expense.
Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of questions that I have, and again, I apologize for not asking these earlier. I didn't really have them until after I was thinking about this. Did we, and I say we, I talk to you, Michael, did you or your staff reach out to the original businesses that were instrumental in the development of the OASIS program to kind of share with them that we were considering, we, the council, the village, were considering eliminating the program?
Not me. I'm here speaking on behalf of the EDC.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's an important issue that I didn't see in any of the documents that I read. You know, when this originally was developed, the former management of the EDC actually formed a group of businesses on Ogden Avenue to develop this. And I think if we asked and we wanted their information, I think it's important that we go back and let them know this is being, we're dismantling this, we're no longer going to offer this, we're going to offer it through a different program. And I think it's good for a two-way street, because if we wanted their information, develop a program, but we're not going to them to tell them why we're doing it, I don't feel comfortable doing that. I think it may have a negative long-term impact on the goals of the EDC. And I would ask that we do that. I mean, there's really no plans in the future or in the pipeline coming down that we're going to be visiting as a council, are there?
There are no pending OASIS grants.
All right, so maybe we could do that prior to us voting to do the abolishment. I just think it would be proper, in my opinion, especially since there was so much effort and time and meetings that took place to develop this and retweak it. Can you explain a little bit better what we're going to be doing, or what divisions you have, Dave, of the monies that we're going to be saving that we're not earmarking for this? I mean, the redevelopment plan, I recall we had a similar program with the downtown management where we had a lot of, we called it the facade improvement program, but a lot of great results.
Yes, and in the same manner that the facade improvement program was a year-long program and it served its purpose, and then we moved on from that. That's the same idea here.
Okay.
This program has served us very well for 3 years. You can see the list of, I think, 16 projects or 17 projects that it's funded, all clearly improvements to Ogden Avenue. What we're really saying here is a proposed return to the strategy that served us well in the first half of the Ogden Avenue TIF, which was created around the year 2000 or 2001, I believe. Which is investment in public infrastructure and investment in redevelopment projects, which I think is some of the things that the council had talked about when the last round of OASIS grant applications came forward. So this isn't so much a changing of course, it's really going back to a course that served us well in the first 8 to 10 years of this Ogden TIF. As Michael described, we could use the money for catalytic redevelopments. We could use it for investments in public infrastructure, sidewalks, detention basins, utilities, landscaping, things like that. And if the right project comes forward and we are approached by one of these businesses who wants to do an investment in their facade or their site, we could still do that, and we could even use the OASIS funding construct to create a redevelopment agreement. But this really reflects a return to public infrastructure and catalytic redevelopment partnerships.
And for those that don't know, catalytic, what did you call it?
Big projects that have a big impact on our bottom line in terms of sales tax and property tax that also serve to spark reinvestment around them. So some of the projects that we've done in the past, I think CVS and the bank and on Ogden and Fairview, and some other projects in the east side of Ogden come to mind.
Okay. I mean, I'm not, sitting up here hoping that we can save it. I'm not looking to save it. I think you're absolutely right. I think it has run its course. I think it's run its course just like our facade improvement plan did. I'm just concerned about the communications, because that's one thing we pride ourselves on as a community and as a village and as a council, is communication. And we're always looking for more communications, to the point where we have now communications prior to meetings that get to us from the website. So if there's just a way we could do that, I would greatly, greatly appreciate that. And just one final note, I had the opportunity yesterday to, because of the traffic on the Eisenhower, to drive home with a colleague of mine along Ogden Avenue, from basically the city all the way here. And I will tell you, our issues, our challenges facing Ogden Avenue really are no different when you go east. It's the same. It seems like it's just the heritage of that road or whatever. It's really disappointing how from where it started to the far east until I got off of it to go home, it's, I'm sure the businesses are different types of businesses, but you really wouldn't know where you're at because it's all the same. The signs and the overhead power cables and the confusion with traffic. So it's a major challenge, I know it, and it's going to be a challenge for you, Michael, to get it to where we see it, where we want to see it. So I wish you the luck with that. I appreciate the time, Mayor.
No trouble at all. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Newstead?
Thank you, Mayor. I think the OASIS program did serve us well. We had a lot of projects that have, done the goal of reforming Ogden Avenue. I think one of the visions for this council and the goals for this council is to allow the EDC and our own staff to open the doors to maybe other options that were not even within this OASIS program. As the manager and Michael have said, there's still funds available for all sorts of redevelopment and development projects along Ogden Avenue. The one thing that I'll ask for is an update. I don't have a specific time frame, but it'll be all of us keeping up on it and looking for opportunities for redevelopment along Ogden Avenue. Michael does a great job of keeping us informed, I think quarterly, if not more, of what's happening in our village. You know, TIF dollars and TIF law is something that I'm not an expert in by any means, but we have experts in that, and the folks that are on our staff and through the EDC are able to work within those rules and those laws to make sure that we are putting every possible tool out there to bring people to Downers Grove and retain the folks that are already here, and I think we do a good job of that. The OASIS group did put in a lot of time, they did put in a lot of effort. I'd be interested the one interesting thing I saw in the information provided was that some of these grants that were awarded were never used. And I think that's an interesting component. I don't know exactly where that fits into the plan, but I just, there's a little bit of a signal there for me that while we went through the process, they were never really fulfilled. So I would almost rather not go through a long grant process to offer somebody some cash and then not have them use it. Whereas if they come to us, they're serious, we can go through the process of working with the EDC and our staff to get to a potential redevelopment agreement with a parcel. So I appreciate all the hard work that did go into the OASIS plan from the beginning up through right now while the projects are still going on. And I look forward to Ogden still being a priority for the EDC and for our village in redevelopment and development along that corridor. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Barnett?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm supportive of this change. The way I see this is a little more back to Dave's point about the thing to underscore here is that we're not turning down any redevelopment agreements or dialogues associated with those. OASIS was well-intended and it had the results that it intended. From where I sit, those results didn't end up being what I wish they were. OASIS was essentially an effort to start getting that TIF money into circulation more, which is a laudable goal and something I think everybody would probably agree with. My observation of the effect of that was not enough public improvement for the amount of private improvement. It was that kind of upside-down ratio, which is why I have an interest in not doing the OASIS program. Really, it's about setting expectations. It's a lot like for me, it's a lot like communicating the bike story. It's about properly setting the expectations. So when you have a program out there, you can certainly say, well, we won't fund it or we won't approve it, but you put it out there, you're really setting yourself up because people are going to see that as an opportunity as structured, as communicated. I'd rather have those be more open-ended redevelopment agreements, which is where I think we're headed. None of that speaks to this council or this community's lack of interest in creatively assisting or spurring redevelopment within the Ogden Avenue TIF. So I think that's the main thing to underscore. Of course, that's your job to convey, Michael. But it's everybody who's watching at home should certainly not see this as some sort of an attempt to remove ourselves from encouraging public investment or assistance in redevelopment along Ogden Avenue. That's just not the case. So I guess I just wanted to kind of clarify my thoughts on that, Mayor, and maybe speak a little bit for us by saying that we are really still very much interested in any opportunity that comes to us. We just don't want to have misunderstood expectations on the front end.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments? I'll just add to that because I think aspects of what a number of my colleagues have said on this point, I think are all well taken. And it's important to once again revisit the history of OASIS because it was actually quite innovative at the time when we had the Ogden Avenue TIF in place. There were dollars that were being generated by that tax increment financing district, which weren't being immediately used for the type of catalytic or large redevelopment projects that we wanted. The economy was primarily the culprit for that. So the question was, well, was there something that we can be doing that may be a lesser goal, but equally important in terms of the long-term success and aesthetics of Ogden Avenue? And quite innovatively, the OASIS project was born. Commissioner Durkin's absolutely right. There were a number of business owners along Ogden Avenue that were reached out to and contributed to that concept, put time and effort into it. I certainly think that we owe it to them to at least invite them to the conversation, and there's really no rush to decide this next week. We've been talking about OASIS for years. So inviting them to the conversation, should they choose to participate, and making sure that they understand that what we're really talking about here is an evolution and not an execution. I think that's a very important message to convey here. So the history is, again, going back to it, because it's important, that OASIS was basically taking a designated amount of funding and setting it aside to encourage certain types of projects, and they had to be defined in some ways to what types of projects are we looking for. And we as a council and as a staff and as a community have kind of struggled a little bit with defining what the filter is, if you will, and then something would come through that would fit through the filter, but, well, that's not exactly what I had in mind for the project, and then we would tweak the program, and then we would go through the whole thing again. And in the meantime, time has passed, things have changed, redevelopment opportunities are coming up again, and I think there's a concern that if we perhaps arbitrarily set aside $250,000 for this program, we don't want to be caught not having it available, one of those tools available to us for other types of projects. And rather, what we would like to say is that now, as part of the evolution of Ogden Avenue, the evolution of our thinking, the evolution of the economy, OASIS has evolved to a larger, more comprehensive program, which is what it was originally intended to be back when the Ogden Avenue TIF was created, where it is one of many, it is a source, a tool that can be used to facilitate redevelopment opportunities of all different sizes, shapes, flavors, and scales. And when they come, we should address them and consider them on a case-by-case basis. We should encourage them, as Commissioner Barnett points out, no different than we did before, and then we'll just judge them on their individual merits. And if they make sense and they're consistent with the Ogden Avenue Master Plan and our comprehensive plan and the vision for the future, and the economics make sense, and it's the right mix of incentives, or whatever the case may be, we'll approve them. And we may not get a 7-0 support for every project, but if enough people think that it meets the criteria, no different than in the past, we'll go forward. So I think that is a very important message to convey, that is the evolution. It's not that OASIS is being killed and we no longer want any of these projects. I think that really it sort of takes a restriction off of the EDC, because they no longer have to operate in the OASIS and non-OASIS buckets. Now you can blend them together and have a full, more robust set of tools to work with, which I know you are anyway. There are lots of exciting things popping on Ogden Avenue, and whether it's OASIS or it's a part of redevelopment generally, the EDC's mission, and something that can be supported by the Ogden Avenue TIF, then fantastic. I think I've said it, everyone has said it up here, we want to continue to encourage that. So this is merely saying that we're not going to sort of set aside $250,000 every year. It will be considered as part of the broader mix of opportunities on that corridor. I do think that maybe we ought to tap the brakes a little bit on just writing it off, and have the reach out to those who were previously involved in it to make sure that they understand and the community understands what we're doing here. So we're really elevating it, not eliminating it. And to that end, I just want to point out, and I mentioned this to the village manager, the actual language of the ordinance sounds a little bit more like an execution than an evolution. And I'm sure this is just something that we routinely keep in any ordinance that would call for the repeal of something that's in existence. But one of the whereas clauses says the village council determined that it is no longer in the best interest of the village to continue the Ogden Avenue Site Improvement Strategy Program. And that's not quite what I hear everyone saying. It's not that it was a bad idea, it didn't work, we want to get rid of it. I think we're really saying we want to just open it up and keep it as part of our broader goals. It's been successful, and we want to encourage those same types of projects, but in a broader stage, so to speak. So maybe we can look at that language, because I wouldn't want the message to be misconstrued as to what we're doing. The other thing that I would like to somehow retain, if we could, is we have the guidance and we have the experience of the OASIS program. So when Mr. Casa or others, whoever they might be, are looking for either creating or identifying opportunities for redevelopment along Ogden Avenue, and someone says, well, yeah, I'd like to do a project, and I understand that you have tools available to help me do that, but what kind of things do you guys have in mind? Can you give me some idea? And maybe it's not as a rigid filter as the OASIS program, but at least we can then point to projects in the past and say, well, these are the ones that were done before. That's not to say that everyone's going to like everything that comes before the council. Each project will be judged on its own individual merits, given the circumstances of the time. But if you want to get an idea of the kinds of things that have happened historically, here's what you can look at. And by the way, here were some of the things that were considered by the council to be important at the time. So if we can somehow retain some of the guidance and experience from OASIS, and some, I don't want to do it in a rigid way, but in a way that can provide encouragement and yet also appropriately manage expectations, I think that would be an ultimate outcome. And that might be another reason to sort of tap the brakes on this evolution rather than sort of a, yeah, thank you. I didn't want to use that word 3 times. Rather than bring it to a dead stop. So those are my thoughts. But I think we're all saying the same thing in different ways, and I think it's important that the community understand where this is evolving, and a lot of it has to do with the changes in the economy. There are opportunities today that there weren't there 4 or 5 years ago. So any other questions or discussion from the council on the topic? Or any words of terror from Mr. Castro?
We will reach out to the people who helped us create this program and report back at the appropriate time with a recommendation based on that.
Thanks. And they may not have any interest in participating, but I think, as Commissioner Durkin says, we owe them at least the courtesy to let them know what's going on. Commissioner?
Yeah, I just have a real quick one. In light of what we're talking about here, through a redevelopment program. And the mayor had stated if somebody came before us, and you feel, a manager Fieldman stated as well, that we would work and see if it fit into the toolbox that we had. If we had somebody in our downtown with this type of program, or does this type of program exist?
Yes.
In our downtown? So the facade improvement program, as we knew it, is gone.
Correct.
Has been retired, but there's a program similar that could be used if we had somebody interested.
Right. They're both,
I didn't know that. That's great news.
Both the same program, tax increment financing, and the vehicle by which the village participates with incentives using those monies is through redevelopment agreements. Both TIF districts, all TIF districts in Illinois have that available.
That's good news. I didn't know that. Thank you.
You didn't think government could be educational, did you?
And that ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fieldman. That brings us to the mayor's report. I have no report at this time, so we'll bring us back to Mr. Fieldman for the village manager's report.
The draft final long-range planning report. The long-range planning report has been published on our village website. It's right there on the home page. We will be meeting next week, and there's a hard copy in the mayor's hands right there. We will be meeting next week on Tuesday, right after the village council meeting, to discuss the final plan and see if we need to make any more changes to that plan. It does reflect the 2 previous public meetings. Comments from the council, staff, and members of the public that participated are reflected in the draft document. We look forward to further participation from the council and the public, so join us next Tuesday following this meeting.
Thank you. I know that I've already started to make some notes and little ideas and wording changes here and there, and I would just, I will encourage myself to get those into you sooner than later so that you have all the benefit of them before our next meeting and discussion. I would just encourage my colleagues to do the same thing. As I took it out, I started writing things, and we probably all do that to make it for a more productive meeting next time.
Residents are encouraged to do the same. If you click on that document, you'll find ways that you can provide comments to the village staff and the village council. There's ways to contact us there. We definitely want your opinions before and during and after the meeting. Thank you.
Well stated. I would encourage everyone in the viewing audience to get out their red pen and make comments either the old-fashioned way or electronically. Thank you. That then brings us to our village attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Only 2 items tonight. The first is an ordinance amending the stormwater and floodplain provisions, and the second is an ordinance repealing the OASIS program. Thank you, Mayor.
Question on that. Do we want to have that on the agenda next week for a vote?
No.
Yeah. Oasis? Yes. Yeah. Will they actually repeal? I do. Are we going to be able to have the outreach that we just discussed in time?
Well, I think if you're explaining it, that we are actually expanding it, expanding the opportunities, making it more flexible, I wouldn't see why anyone would be against it.
I don't disagree, but I think, as Commissioner Durkin mentioned, I'm not so sure that that is universally perceived right now. And if we can achieve that goal between now and next week, that's fine with me. But again, I mean, there's no urgency to this situation. I mean, if we were to just give it time to make sure that we knew, and we might know by the time we need to put this on the agenda.
We'll know what?
Whether the staff has had an opportunity to actually contact the dozen or so businesses that were involved in the creation of Oasis in the beginning, just to make sure they're aware that this is a pretty evolutionary change.
But is that going to change the opinion of the majority of the council for yes or no on the
I just
retirement?
think it's good governance.
Well, I think it's a good part of our process. It's a communication that we should do, but think between now and basically next Friday or this Friday afternoon, we can achieve a lot of those calls. Maybe not all 12, but start that ball rolling with our staff and maybe through some of the contacts through the EDC.
Well, hypothetically speaking, just to answer your question, if 15 businesses got up at the podium next week and shared their views with you, you may or may not change your opinion, but we don't know, is my point.
Well,
I'm not talking about delaying this for months, I'm just talking about maybe just to give an opportunity to have some communications.
The report out by the village attorney is just a requirement that we report it out.
I understand that.
And it doesn't mean it has to be on the agenda next week. What we like to do is, I'll reach out, and Michael and I will reach out to a couple of the folks we talked about here, and then I can contact each of you and give you a status report.
That's fine.
And then we'll make that decision come to the end of the week.
I understand that that's simply a formality of you reporting it out as next week, but it just sparked my memory. It was a catalytic comment that caused me to think that I should have raised that issue earlier. And it may be fine. It may all be accomplished by tomorrow, for all I know. That's fine. I just want to make sure.
The executioner, the black man.
The harbinger merchant of death.
Tabling is always a possibility, too.
I'm sorry?
Tabling is always a possibility as well.
Fair point.
This isn't the first, it happens to be in first reading format tonight, but it's certainly nowhere near the first conversation that this group has had about the potential of no longer having a program in place. I mean, the first serious wording of exactly that was at our LRP meeting at Fire Station 2. It had been talked about 2 or 3 times in evolutionary comments as we were applying it. And then I think I remember that we even talked about, maybe we ought to make clear that this was at risk so we weren't accepting new applications. So there hasn't been the official reach out that Commissioner Durkin pointed out, and it should be done just to be fair and open. But I don't see any problem in putting it on the agenda at this point. We'll see how it goes over the next week.
Commissioner Barnett, you're absolutely correct. We can put it on the agenda. We can always decide to table it. You're absolutely right. That's fine. That satisfies my reasoning for making the comment in the first place. And I think I will note this is probably the most discussion we've ever had in the attorney's report.
That's right.
In the last 2 years. So you never know what's coming. Thank you. Bringing us to item 13, council member new business. Do any members of the village council have any items of new business they would like to raise before this august body? You like that? Hearing no new business, that brings us to item 14. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. I have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose? Aye. Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin? Aye. Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Motion to adjourn has passed. We are adjourned. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.